I cannot believe that it is already the month of May, which means soon it'll be midterms. Midterms. So what issues are driving you to the polls this election cycle? Will the abortion news bring them out? Well, we'll have to wait and see. We did watch Georgia voters break records this week as all the players came from far and wide to cast ballots during early voting. Meanwhile, Indiana and Ohio hosted their primaries. So now that we have a preview of what a right-wing extremist conservative majority government could look like, will voters do what is necessary to defeat it? Joining me now are LaTosha Brown. She's the co-founder of Black Voters Matter, also MSNBC political contributor and Morgan State University professor, and my arch nemesis, Dr. Jason Johnson, and my favorite, the nicer one, Elie Mystal, justice correspondent for The Nation and author of the recent New York Times bestseller, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. I couldn't think of a better panel. LaTosha, I have to kick it off with you because I saw your tweet when the SCOTUS ruling was leaked, and you think this leak helps Dems. Maybe so, but I'm curious, will it be enough to overcome the rampant voter suppression? They could potentially steal this election. We've seen what happens when the right-wing extremists see election results they don't like. What are your thoughts?
You know, absolutely. I think that is $1 million question. Will it be enough to push the Democrats over the edge? But I do believe that there is a tremendous amount of frustration in women across the board. Everybody that I've been talking to are very upset about this ruling, because this is really around a question of women having agency and literally being able to have the fullness of their humanity really respected. And so what I do believe that is going to happen, I think we're going to see younger women voters, and I think young people can be a game changer for the Democrats. It's a matter of how they message and take advantage of this opportunity.
Well, we'll see. Jason, I'm curious your thoughts here, because this ruling was a big deal, as you know. It hasn't been public yet. It was leaked. So if this upholds, what impact do you think that's going to have on midterms?
So I want to spin off the point that LaTosha just made. So one of my assignments in my class with my Morgan State University semester students is they are following members of Congress on social media all semester.
Yeah.
And I was shocked by the number of members of Congress who 24 hours after this leak hadn't tweeted anything, hadn't put anything on Instagram, hadn't put anything on Facebook. And I'm talking to my kids in class. The first time they had heard about this was when we were in class.
Really?
So actual members of Congress hadn't tweeted anything. So,
but is that the only way they can hear about something on Twitter?
Well, I mean, but if you're a member of Congress and you care about this is who you're supposed to be talking to. So LaTosha's point where it's like, will the young people bring out? Well, you got to talk to them first. That's the thing. I think that this leak, I don't think it's going to change anyone from voting Republican to Democrat. It could turn somebody from a non-voter to a voter, and that's going to happen if there's enough recruitment and if people make it clear this is how it changed your life. Because it's not just about abortion. It's about sodomy laws. It's about same-sex marriage. There's a lot of other ways this affects people personally.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Elie, listen, we have a lot of legal challenges here as well when you think about midterms, because all eyes are on Georgia, where we just talked about seeing voting records, early voting records this week. But it's also a place where Trump has a lot of legal issues, like the grand jury that will decide if he interfered with the election, the 2020 election. He did. What's your prediction? And will it even matter to the Georgia GOP voters? Like, I can't imagine that it would.
Abortion has been legal in Texas since September, and I ain't seeing nobody doing anything about it, all right? Like, there are things that we could be doing right now to make constitutionally protected health care services available to women right now that we're not doing. Joe Biden could be federalizing abortion services out of federal facilities right now. He's not doing that. The Senate could pass a bill protecting a woman's right to choose right now. The Senate, 2 senators in particular, are not doing that. So when we talk about having a real uprising around these issues, what we need to see is not just the people who always care about this rising up, because women have been fighting in the trenches over this issue for 2 decades, all right? They're not going anywhere. We need people to get their back, right? You know who I haven't seen talk about this? Men. I haven't seen a whole lot of men get risen up and get angry and get activated over this issue. And so as we always like to talk about the 52% of white women who voted for Donald Trump, 62% of white men voted for that guy. So, like, when is that happening? And until that happens, and until we have people kind of explaining why that needs to happen, I am skeptical that this or any other Christian theocratic decision will wake people up and drive them to the polls.
Well, I think you make such a good point, Ellie. That's 100% true. I am curious your thoughts specifically in Georgia, because look, we have to hold. That's okay, because I wanted your thoughts. I wanted your thoughts on abortion, brother. So you're good. But I do want your legal perspective, because you're the only lawyer on the panel with us, on the situation in Georgia. Because even though abortion is a big deal for a lot of people in Georgia, I'm just shocked to see that some polls have Herschel Walker polling ahead of Reverend Raphael Warnock. A man with multiple personalities accused of beating his wife is polling higher than a pastor. And I'm just curious, will the legal entanglement of Donald Trump interfering with the 2020 election, or being accused of interfering with the 2020 election, if we believe our ears he did, trying to anyway, will that impact voters there?
We haven't seen that happen yet. Donald Trump has been in legal jeopardy since he came down the escalator, and the people who like Donald Trump have baked in the fact that he's a criminal and don't care about it, and the people who don't like Donald Trump already know that he's a criminal and are doing what they can to stop him. So we haven't seen new allegations of wrongdoing impact Donald Trump, but we also haven't seen prosecutions of Donald Trump. And so I go back to Merrick Garland. I go back to the legal system. I go back to the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene perjured herself in her trial over her 14th Amendment violation. But I'm not surprised that she was allowed to run again in Georgia because, A, she hasn't actually been charged with sedition by the person who could charge her with sedition, number one. And number two, it takes a prosecutor to now prosecute her for the perjury that I believe she committed while she was defending herself. So we haven't seen the actual prosecutions that might move the needle on some of these voters.
Well, Latasha, Black Voters Matter is, of course, a national organization, but you do a lot of work in Georgia. Ellie just talked about perjury Taylor Greene and, you know, the challenges that she has there being allowed to run again. I'm curious because Black Voters Matter, people are looking to Latasha and Cliff to out-organize the legislative failures and leapfrog over the voter suppression. I'm just curious how challenging that will be given all the economic issues happening in society, all the, our, you know, rights are being eroded, and just political apathy among some who want to see better results and more results. Your thoughts on how people can out-organize what we're facing this midterm cycle?
You know, I think it's a matter of we've got to respond, that at the end of the day, what is happening, you know, I often think about some of the issues that we see in the media that we're saying that these are the issues that people should be caring about. That's not what we're hearing when we're going on the street talking to folks. There is a certain sense of anger and frustration that is happening. People in Georgia have not forgotten the voter suppression. They have not forgotten what Trump has done. So whether it's Trump or not, that what they do recognize, I think there's a keen recognition that we are under attack. It is a question whether the resources will be spent in these areas so that those organizations that mobilize, it hasn't been just the candidates or the party mobilizing voters. I would argue that in 2020, it was actually the organizations, not just the candidates, not just the party, but it was actually this third rail of organizations that were moving people to the poll. So I think that it is, yes, when we're talking about if we can out-organize, we've always said it's not a matter of out-organizing. It is a question, though, when we turn out for the fight of our lives.